Donald Trump's son, Eric, recently had an interview with the Telegraph, which is a publication in the UK. And he was asked about a number of things, including nepotism within the White House and also Donald Trump's decision to take action in Syria. Now, those two things are actually related. So let's focus on nepotism and how that played a role in what Donald Trump decided to do. Now, when it comes to nepotism, Eric Trump not only agrees that it plays a role in the White House, he thinks it's a great thing. He says, you trust the people who you are closest to. Okay, fair enough. He also says he, meaning Trump, knows I care about the family. He knows I care about the brand. He knows I deeply care about the properties, our amazing teams. Okay, so essentially he's saying, well, look, my dad knows I care about these issues, so of course nepotism is a great thing because I'm gonna do a better job than anyone else, right? He continues, is that nepotism? Absolutely. Is that also a beautiful thing? Absolutely. Family business is a beautiful thing. Okay.
He's starting to sound like his dad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a product of Trump, and it doesn't surprise me that he would openly and transparently applaud nepotism, whether it be in business or the White House. Trump's 33-year-old son, Eric, also told the Daily Telegraph on Monday that the strike in Syria was influenced in part by Ivanka, who he said was heartbroken and outraged by the chemical attack. Ivanka is a mother of 3 kids and she has influence. I'm sure she said, listen, this is horrible stuff. My father will act in times like that. Okay, so obviously nepotism plays a role when it comes to the White House because you have Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, working very closely with Donald Trump. They have positions, official positions within the White House. And so I think that this says a lot about what the future of this administration is going to be like. And I also think that it's interesting that Ivanka continuously gets, perceived and represented in the media as like this secret liberal, right? Who's looking out for women, and she's not really complicit. She doesn't think she's complicit, she's trying to do good. Well, if this is the one example of her having some sway over Trump, it's a pretty bad example if you're trying to make an argument that she's gonna look out for liberal interests. But anyway, go ahead, I want you guys to jump in.
First of all, let me just address the irony that I'm doing a story on nepotism, but having said that, let's move past that point and I'll read all your comments later. But you nail it on the head with the Ivanka thing. Like everyone talks about Ivanka and Jared Kushner, and there's a very important reason for that. And that's not just because Donald Trump is sexually attracted to his daughter, and that's a fact that he's mentioned over and over again, but because they're elitist New York socialites. And the media loves elitist New York socialites because Donald Trump is like weird and says crazy things, so like they can't really understand him. But Ivanka and Jared Kushner, they understand. They're like, we rub shoulders with them. We get that. They're celebrities in their own way. And Jared's brother is dating Karlie Kloss, and Karlie Kloss voted for Hillary Clinton. Like, what's that about? And in the end of the day, I doubt that Ivanka has even the slightest bit of influence over her father. And even if she does, where was her heartbroken influence when her dad was executive ordering the Muslim ban? Where was her influence over the healthcare bill? Like, if she's so sympathetic and if she's such an outspoken secret liberal, then, and if she has so much persuasive power over her father, where is her influence when it comes to like literally 98% of the other things that his dad does that are awful for the country? And this really pisses me off because we constantly set the bar so low for these people. It's just like when Donald Trump bombs the hell out of a Syrian base after informing the Russians that they're coming to bomb them through the proper protocols, and then everyone's applauding like this is it. This is the first time he's been presidential. How is this the first time he's been presidential?
He's never been presidential, and if your standard for presidential is someone taking action, military action in another country, or using missiles against another country based on emotion or advice from their child or their daughter, then your bar for presidential is very low. But Grace, I want you to jump in because I actually do think, and tell me if you disagree, because I might be wrong. I actually do think that Ivanka Trump has influence over Donald Trump. I think that he does respect and take into account her positions on issues. I just disagree that she's a liberal. I don't know where that comes from. If you look at her own business practices, you will see that she does not believe in liberal policies pertaining to employment and taking care of your workers. So I don't know why anyone would think she is, but I don't know, I could be wrong.
Well, no, I completely agree with everything you said. I think that, the favoritism that Donald Trump shows to his daughter Ivanka is, it's very apparent. You see it in every single interview when he talks about her, the access that she has to his administration, to policy, and but this interview with the Daily Telegraph with Eric Trump is very troubling to me for a number of reasons. One, there's the nepotism and sort of the acceptance of just like nepotism is the way of life in the Trump family. But aside from that, it felt reading through it incredibly emotionally manipulative, and also it feels as though we're being primed that when the American people will read this interview that we are being primed for the military actions that are to come or that have already happened, and that's what made me really frustrated reading this through, because you have Eric Trump appealing to your emotional sensibilities, saying, "Oh, she was so heartbroken. The outrage of these children being gassed, it's so sad." And how could he have the audacity? How could this administration have the audacity in the same breath that they are calling for military action against the Syrian regime, and they won't, in that same breath, they won't make a change to alter their stance on the Syrian refugee crisis. But yet they still want to appeal to us emotionally, because then people that aren't well informed on the situation will be like, well, they have to do something, they have to step in as long as the refugees aren't coming here. And that's why I feel like this interview is really gross, because it is Eric Trump, who we actually don't hear from a lot, stepping up and sort of and acting as the manipulator on behalf of his family. Because again, he talked about the nepotism, so he wants to do the family brand. You always trust the people that are closest to you. He said it best. So it feels like he's sort of doing their dirty work in appealing to our sensibilities.
The one positive outcome out of all of this is that Eric Trump, much like the rest of the Trump family, will eventually step over his own words and say something and admit something without really realizing that he's admitting it. And one thing that really stood out to me in this interview was that when he said, if there was anything that the strike on Syria did, it was to validate the fact that there is no Russia tie. Now, a lot of people aren't even focusing on this because there's so much more in the interview that you can focus on, but like that is so stupid. And he's basically admitting the real reason behind why Donald Trump did this. Donald Trump was given 3 different, this is according to the press corps that was at Mar-a-Lago. He was given 3 options and he chose this one. One was heavily militarized, like boots on the ground. The other one was nothing, or a tweet or a strongly worded letter. And then this was the option that he took over the 3, and he chose it because it perfectly masks or misdirects the conversation away from the Russia ties, the Russia investigation that he, by the way, even though Devin Nunes recused himself of, he put in his other cronies in charge of that investigation, and slowly they'll push away that investigation and no one will talk about it anymore, while they point the finger at look, we can't love Russia. Look at what we're saying towards Russia. Look at how militant we've been against Russia.
Look, Eric Trump is not tactful. He was very transparent in the interview about one of the reasons why Trump might have taken some military action. I mean, he just straight out says that we're not, all of a sudden we're not focusing on Russia anymore. Isn't that weird? So yeah, look, I think that there is a political motive behind what Trump did. I do think that Ivanka Trump has some influence over him. I do not believe for a second that Ivanka Trump is a liberal who's gonna look out for the best interests of social justice or anything like that. And the one thing that I wanted to add was, look, the chemical weapons and the chemical attack on Syrian civilians was horrendous, and it was the second time that it was done. But civilians have been targeted over and over again by Assad, okay? And that is something that we've been reporting on for a very long time. And you wanna know something? The right wing hasn't cared for 1 second. The Trump administration never cared. They never cared about the refugees that we've been begging this administration to allow into the country, the vast majority of which are innocent women and children who are just looking to survive. They had absolutely no sympathy for them. And now all of a sudden, oh my God, there were chemical weapons, and now we suddenly care. Not buying it for a second, not buying it for a second. There have been so many innocent Syrian civilians who have died as a result of this war, and no one in America has really cared about it. And so the fact that the media all of a sudden is rallying behind Trump and pretending like he's being presidential, no. First of all, the media is the problem. They didn't care to cover these stories of civilians dying as a result of the war, dying as a result of Assad. And it wasn't just collateral damage as the US has used in the past. These are people that were specifically targeted by Russia-backed Syrian forces, again, Assad. So anyway, it's a really frustrating situation, and this whole thing with nepotism and the lack of strategy is very scary, not only for people in Syria, but also people here in the United States, and also members of our military who might, unfortunately, end up in Syria and might end up fighting a war that Trump has no real strategy for.
Young Turks now has over 6 billion lifetime views. You know who did that? You did that. We're now larger than CNN, ABC, you name a news network online, we're larger than them. And you built all that as everyone scoffed and didn't believe. And here we are, guys, thanks to you. Build independent media together with us at tytnetwork.com/join.